We are studying the Jewish approach to fear and anxiety. We're surrounded in strange, difficult, challenging times today where the mass media is sowing hysteria, and it's difficult to differentiate between what's really legitimate concern and what is sensationalism and hysteria. The main thing we need to know is that our blessing, our salvation comes not from the cable news. It doesn't come from the CDC or from any government agency. Our sustenance and blessing comes from God. And that's what's so important about the doctrine of blind trust. I want to remind you of what is the doctrine of blind trust before we proceed further into the Jewish approach to conquering fear and anxiety. The doctrine goes as follows: that God treats us the way we treat him. God is a mirror image to us. How we initiate the relationship is exactly how God reciprocates that relationship. Good morning, Mickey. And therefore, when we initiate the relationship with God, which is one of blind trust means I trust in God without calculating. Blind trust means I trust in God without calculating whether God is strong enough to solve this massive problem that we're facing globally or personally. When I initiate a relationship with God, which is blind trust, then God reciprocates that relationship by granting me blind blessing, which means blessing me with the outcome that I need, blindly, without looking into whether I deserve it or not. My blind trust in and of itself is what draws and causes the blind blessing. Hence the term coined by the Rebbes, the Chabad Rebbes, which is tracht gut wird sein gut, think good and therefore it will be good. In the merit of thinking good doesn't just mean positive thinking. It means trusting blindly in God's almighty benevolence. Thinking good, that will cause that it will be good, notwithstanding your spiritual, religious, or any other standing. Whether you believe or don't believe, if you keep Shabbos or not, it doesn't matter. This is an override switch. And I want to welcome on YouTube, Mr. Grapefruit Drink. I see that you ordered the book. That's great. This is the book that Mr. Grapefruit is talking about. Duties of the Heart by Feldheim Publishers. That's what we're studying. Highly encourage you to buy this book on Amazon. Might take a few days, but definitely a very worthwhile investment. 2-volume book, Duties of the Heart by Feldheim Publishers. And Deborah, good morning, Deborah. I'm glad that you are enjoying the Duties of the Heart study. On Facebook, I'm not seeing any other comments. Richard Greenspan joined us, and Ari Raz. Good morning, shalom, welcome, and we are moving forward. Now that we've established the doctrine of trust, let's get into the details. So if you do have the book, we are in the middle of at the top of page 361 of the Gates of Trust. This is about 120-page work. We're going to work through this one page at a time throughout the quarantine and maybe beyond. Hopefully it's going to be over in no time. Back to business. I hear the economy is doing better, which is, thank God, l'chaim, amazing. Keep it up. And we should all just cruise from here into Mashiach. It's just so interesting, that I was just talking to my father in South Africa moments ago, and he was telling me that starting this evening, they're enforcing a mandatory quarantine across the entire country of South Africa. I think it's like 40 million people. Until the end of Pesach, the last day, the 8th day of Pesach. That's April 16th. And what's so interesting is that in the first Passover, 3,312 years ago, in the year 1313 BCE, the Jewish people were forced to observe Passover in their own homes. The verse says, "V'atem al teitzu ish mipetach beito ad boker," and you shall not leave, each man shall not leave the entrance of his home until morning. Whilst there was a plague going on outside, that was the plague of the death of the firstborn, the 10th plague in Egypt. God was passing over the Jewish homes while we were stuck in our homes. There's like biblical undertones here. God willing, we should go from this quarantine into the arrival of Mashiach, which is an era of higher consciousness. The coming of Mashiach, in the words of Isaiah the prophet, the glory of God will be revealed, and all physical flesh will see that the word of God has spoken. Can you imagine reaching a state of enlightened consciousness, God willing, today, with the arrival of Mashiach? It's so beautiful. I can't wait. Folks, do share your comments. I'm excited to talk to you, share with you. It's a little lonely during this time of quarantine, and it's so awesome always to get your comments. We're going to stick this to a strict time limit. We'll be done this and Talmud by 9:30, so let's do this so that way I can respect your time and you can go on with whatever plans you plan for the day. Back to page 361, top of the page in this book, Duties of the Heart. We're in the section called the gates of trust. Another advantage to the person who trusts in God, this is such a beautiful way to live your life, is that one who trusts in God is not hindered in his trust by wealth. For he does not rely on money. Rather, he regards it as a deposit. We did this a little bit yesterday. I'm going to do it again because it was so powerful. Rather, he regards his money as a deposit which he has been commanded to use in certain ways and for certain purposes for a limited amount of time. Your relationship with money is a perfect litmus test. Good morning, Harvey. I miss you, my friend. Wow. So good. A blast from the past. So good to see you. Your relationship with money is the perfect litmus test as to the status of your relationship with God. You see, we all believe in something. If you don't believe in God, then you believe in money, or you believe in your car, or you believe in your other status symbols or identity enhancers, as a good friend of mine, Barry, likes to say. He might be here in the vicinity of in the zone of virtual Torah study today. How many of us look to money as our God? Now, when I say that money is our God, I want you to think about it this way. Just think about it. When something is your God, it doesn't mean that you pray to it. It means that you're willing to go out of your way for it, and that you'll forfeit other parts of your life for it. For example, so as a believer, as a Jew who believes in God, I hope, I'm willing to forego money for God. So if somebody offered me $1 million, as this actually happened when we were building our shul, in order to remove the mechitza, the men and women divider in our shul, I said, sorry, I can't do that because, my God opposes it. I can't take down a mechitza for $1 million, right? If somebody offers me, I don't know, a meeting with somebody very important on Shabbos, I can't go. It's Shabbos, right? So my Shabbos comes first. But if your money is your God, then it means that you'll forego your God for money, or you'll forego your marriage for money, or you might forego your kids for money. Think about that for a second. Just think about that for a second. How many of us will throw our kids under the bus for the sake of money? There's a very peculiar law in Torah. It's called the law of the redemption of the firstborn. The law of the redemption of the firstborn. What it means is that if it's a biblical commandment, that it's all connected to Passover, by the way, because Passover is when God passed over the Jewish homes while he was inflicting the plague upon the firstborn of the Egyptians, right? So when the Egyptian firstborns were afflicted, God saved and protected the Jewish firstborns, right? Because of that, the Jewish firstborns are forever indebted to God, forever. Because he saved them. They should have been killed then in Egypt. And because they weren't killed, therefore, God is, they literally owe their lives to God. So what that means is, on a practical level, that on the morning of the Passover Seder, the firstborns of all Jewish homes have to fast because God should have killed them on that day and they didn't, so they fast. Another thing that the firstborns do is that when a firstborn is born, you're supposed to bring him to a priest. And in a ritual called a pidyon haben, a redemption of the firstborn, you bring him to the priest, and the priest asks the question. He says to you, look, a firstborn was born to you and he's consecrated to God. Would you like to keep the boy? Or would you like to give the boy to God, or would you like to redeem him for 5 shekels, for 5 silver shekels? Basically, he's asking, do you want the boy or do you want the money? Now, I don't think any human being in the history of the world ever said, yeah, I think I'll keep the 5 shekels, you keep the boy. Especially if it's your firstborn. But the question seems so shallow. It's such a weird question. I mean, how is it that we're doing this whole ritual out of a firstborn? I mean, is this a joke? What's going on over here? I mean, why would you even ask such a question? Do you want the baby or do you want the money? But in reality, if you think about it, what happens when that boy, fast forward 10 years, 5 years, the boy says, tugging at your sleeve, and he says, Daddy, please can you play a game with me? And what do? You pull out your you pull out your phone and you're like, oh, not now, I'm busy now. And he comes back to you the next day and he says, Daddy, can we go play catch? And you're busy again on your cell phone. And it's all in the name of money, because you're making money, you're supporting the family, you're taking care of him, you're really loving him in a way that he doesn't even understand. But really, you're not. Really, it's all about you, it's all about money, and the boy is out the window. And that's really the big question over here. Who is your God? Who is your highest allegiance to? Is it to God? Is it to money? Is it to your children? Is it to your wife? And that's a big question we have to ask ourselves. So when it comes to trust in God, what the gates of trust here is telling us is that we've got to be very, very, very cognizant of our relationship with money. Many of us have a relationship with money which is like very attached to money. As a rabbi who runs a Chabad house, I can tell you that I meet with a lot of people that, I have to talk to them about money, about getting engaged with the Jewish community and supporting the Jewish community. Some people have a very, very smooth relationship with money. They have no problem like making donations. Other people, it doesn't matter how much money they have, by the way, it's irrelevant. Some people just are very, very attached to their money and they have a very hard time giving away $10. And it's just fascinating when you look at people and you see their relationship with money. So it's got a lot to do with who your trust is in. If your trust is in God, the money is just a deposit. But if you don't really trust in God and you're holding on to your money, that's what makes you who you are. That's what gives you a sense of security, a sense of identity. That how can you possibly give that away? And that's what he's pointing out to us this morning in the gates of trust. Someone who trusts in God knows that the money all comes from God. All my blessing, every single thing that I have comes from God. God gives me what I need. He gives it to me when I need it. And when there's a door that doesn't open before me, it's because what's behind that door is not meant for me. It's not good for me. So you don't get attached to your money. The money's just a vehicle, a tool to help you operate in this world. But you don't get emotionally invested in your money because you're trusting in God, right? And how this expresses itself in a very, very practical way is when you give it away. When you give away money to charity, do you expect the whole world to bow before you? Do you expect the recipient of the charity, of the gift, to bow down before you and to kiss your toes? Or do you say, look, it was just a deposit with me and I'm the trustee, so don't get excited. I gave the money. I did my obligation. Let's move on. You don't have to praise me until the cows come home. It's okay. You know what I mean? It's very interesting when you see when people give a gift, give a charity, how what kind of admiration they need. Obviously, everybody needs to be thanked and appreciated and validated, because everybody, at the end of the day, if they gave the gift to a certain cause and not to another, then you've got to exhibit gratitude and validate their choice and their confidence in you. But the question is, in and of yourself as the giver, how attached are you to the money? How attached are you to the praise that follows the money? Do you consider yourself a trustee of God's benevolence, or do you consider yourself an incredibly kind person giving to the undeserving from your hard-earned wealth what is really yours and not belonging to anybody else? So that's an interesting point, and let's look at it in the words of the gates of trust. So rather, God's deposit, it as a deposit, the money as a deposit, which has been commanded, he has been commanded to use in certain ways and for certain purposes, and for a limited amount of time. It's not yours forever. If it stays at length in his possession, he does not on its account become arrogant. He doesn't remind the recipients of his charity of the kindness he rendered to them, for he was only performing his duty. He does not wish to be thanked and praised for his kindness, but thanks the Creator may be exalted for having made him an agent of kindness. I'm trying to point out a quick story here. You're supposed to give to charity. You're supposed to give a tithe to charity. I want to welcome my friend Peony Super from Melbourne, Australia. He runs the Chabad of young people in Melbourne, Australia. Great to have you here, Peony. I remember you studying with me about 20 years ago. Good to have you with us, my friend. Good. So I want to just point out to you that, God is in a partnership with us when it comes to money, and he's always testing us. God wants you to give 10% of your gross income to tzedakah. If you do that, he continues to give you more, and he's going to test you more and more. It's constantly being tested. When I was 13 years old, I was making 100 South African rand a week from from the jobs that I was doing. I would give 10 rand each week away and to charity, and I was like, I felt amazing. It was like an incredible experience. And the more I gave, the more I made. The more I made, the more I gave. It was a vicious cycle, a very positive vicious cycle. It was beautiful, a very good experience, and it's something which I continue to do to this very day. The more I make, the more I give. There's a great story of a guy who was a simple shopkeeper in Tel Aviv, and he made money. I think he was a shoemaker or whatever he was. He every time he got paid, he removed 10% and he gave it to charity. And slowly but surely, he got a little bit bigger, and he bought the store next door, and he bought another store, and he became pretty massive in Israel. Became one of the wealthiest people in Israel, as he owned stores in various cities, and he owned real estate, and he bought gas stations. He was really an entrepreneur, but he made so much money. He was making millions and millions and millions of shekels that by now his financial advisors got involved. They said, maybe you shouldn't give 10%. Maybe you could be a little more sophisticated about this, about how you give your charity. And basically, long story short, he stopped giving his 10%. He stopped giving his 10%. So very quickly, things started going downhill. He started getting an environmental problem in this place, and a zoning problem in that place, and protesting here, and some other government issue problem, and on and on. He started getting all sorts of problems. Eventually, he came to his rabbi, and he was like, "Look, Rabbi, what happened to me? What did I do to deserve this?" And the rabbi, who knew him from the very beginning, he said, "Listen, in the beginning, you were a good trustee. You gave away 10% to charity religiously, no matter what, no questions asked. God saw that you were a good partner. So the more that you gave to charity, 10%, the more that God said, okay, I'll give you more and more and more. But when God saw that you stopped giving away 10% to charity, he said, no, you're a weak partner. You've lost your magic touch. And now he has to find someone else to deposit his money with, to see someone else that could be a worthy trustee. If you're not going to be a worthy trustee, then he's going to have to find someone else. And that's the essence of our relationship with money as it pertains to the Jewish approach to fear and anxiety and the doctrine of blind trust. When you have trust in God, then money is but a tool. When you realize that money is but a tool, it manifests itself in the way and the measure in which you give charity. Very, very powerful litmus test. Continuing in the book, if he loses his money, he won't grieve or mourn its absence. Rather, he thanks God when the deposit is collected, just as he thanks him when it was first given to him. He rejoices in his portion. Remember, who is wealthy? He who is happy with his lot. That's what it means to be wealthy. He's not... he doesn't have a bottomless appetite, insatiable appetite, because he knows that the money comes from God. My loyalty and allegiance and reliance is on God. It's not on money. God defines me, not my money. My money is just a tool. He doesn't get excited overly about his money. He rejoices in his portion. He doesn't seek to injure anyone, and he doesn't covet anyone's property. It's another very powerful defining factor. Are you envious of other people's possession? If only I had that car, if only I had that wife, if only I had that house, if only I had that job. You don't have that problem, because when you trust in God, your life is beautiful. I have what I need. I have it when I need it. I have it where I need it. I'm not worried. I'm not stressed out. That's the beauty of the doctrine of trust. The one that trusts in God is never stressed out. There was a beautiful video, which I wish I could share with you right now. I saw it this morning. I don't want to mention his name, even though it is famous. There's a big rabbi in Jerusalem whose sons came to the Rebbe, and I wonder if I can show you the video right here on the screen. His sons came to the Rebbe. It's about a 10-second video, but I think I can show it to you right now. Let me see if I can. His sons came to the Rebbe, and they asked the Rebbe for a blessing for their father. For a blessing for their father, because he was always worried. He was very, very worried about things. Oh yeah, I hope I could find it. He was very worried about all sorts of stuff. So the Rebbe's blessing to them was as follows. Here's what the Rebbe said. Oh no, I think I know where it was. Hold on. Here's where it was. Here. Okay. So I'm gonna see if I can play it for you on the screen. Oh no, it's in English. It's in Hebrew. I'm sorry. It's in English. It's in Hebrew. The subtitles are in Hebrew. I'm just explaining to you. The guy comes to the Rebbe and he says, "A blessing of my father. My father's very, very worried. He's always stressed about money. And he's a big rabbi." So the Rebbe said, "What is he worried? Tell him, I'm watching it right now, he shouldn't have worries." Why should he not have worries? Because worries can only ruin his blessing. If he has strong trust in God, he won't have worries, and strong trust in God will bring him the blessing that he needs. Remember, the doctrine of blind trust is to the exclusion of anxiety. If you have anxiety, it means you don't have blind trust. If you have a shred of anxiety, it means you don't have blind trust. But when you have blind trust in God, when you're not worried, that's when God showers the blessing upon you. So that's the message over here. He rejoices in his portion. He doesn't seek to injure anyone. He doesn't covet anyone else's property. As the wise man said, a righteous man eats only until he is satisfied. That is what is the trusting man's relationship with money. He doesn't let it faze him. Let's go just a little bit further over here. I'm in the middle of 361. Trust in God brings happiness and joy. Among the benefits of trust in God in this world are the following: a heart at rest, free of worldly cares, a tranquil spirit, undisturbed and untroubled by lack of bodily gratification, a sense of calm, security, and peace, as it says in Jeremiah. Blessed is the man who trusts in God. God will be his refuge. He is like a tree planted by water that sends out its roots by the stream. Remember, you're connected to the most powerful entity on the face of the earth in the history of the world, God Almighty. You don't have anything to worry about. Your worry is a slap in the face to God that is showering you with all this tremendous blessing. Don't slap God in the face, because if you do, you're going to offend God. So don't do that. When you trust in God, when you're joyous, when you're happy, that's when God says, "Oh, here's a guy that trusts in me. I'm going to shower him with blessing." That's the doctrine. Another advantage is the soul's release from the need to set out on long journeys. Interesting. You don't need to set out on long journeys which consume the body and shortens one's life. As it says, he weakened my strength on the way. He shortened my days. Why don't you have to go on long journeys? The story is told of one of the ascetics who, before he began the practice of asceticism, traveled to a distant land in search of livelihood. He thought that the source of his money lies in a distant land. He didn't realize the source of his money lies with God. So he traveled very far in a dangerous journey to go find the money that he needed. He met one of the idolaters in the city to which he had traveled, and he said to him, "How utterly blind and lacking in understanding you are to worship idols." So he said to the idol worshiper, "You're so foolish, you're so myopic if you're worshiping idols. I mean, how could you possibly worship idols?" But listen now to what the idolater responds to him. Idolater responds, he says, "And what do you worship?" asked the idolater. Can you imagine? The idolater says to the so-called believer in God, he said, "What do you worship?" He says, "I worship the omnipotent creator, the one provider and supporter. There is nothing like him." The idolater said to him, "Your actions contradict your words." "How so?" "If that were true," said the idolater, "he would have provided you with a livelihood in your own city as he does here. Why would you need to come so far here to get your livelihood? The fact that you came here means that you don't believe in God. And you would have not gone to the trouble of traveling to a distant land such as this one." Unable to reply, he returned home to his land, assumed an ascetic regimen, and never again left the city. Very powerful meditation there, to realize that if you're trusting in God, then you don't need to get stressed out about the origin of your livelihood. You know that the origin of your livelihood is through God. And there's a lot to talk about that. I think I'm going to try to continue that conversation tomorrow. I'm going to try to wrap this up over here. Again, folks, if you have any comments, questions, critique, or anything to input, please do interject. I would love to hear your comments here on Facebook or on YouTube Live. Either one would be a really nice place to hear from you.